and welcome back to another beautiful episode of Transylvaniacs, the show where two longtime friends attempt to watch as many Dracula adaptations as humanly possible, even though it's after Halloween.
Every episode, we try to watch every Dracula adaptation from Dracula A to Dracula Z. It's been a minute since I've had to do that. I really struggled with it, but we got there.
We got there, and this is we're looking at something that's kind of fun and like a little bit of a skip back. So if you've been following along with us, we have been going through the straight adaptations of Dracula chronologically, occasionally interjecting with a new release, because in 2023 we had both Renfield and The Last Voyage of the Demeter come out. But our last chronological one that we watched was the 1979 Werner Herzog version of Nosferatu. However, we did kind of miss one because the 60s and 70s, primarily the 70s, were very flush with Dracula adaptations. And I think just in our research, this one kind of fell through the cracks. But today we're taking a look at the 1968 episode of the British television series Mystery and Imagination, which is extremely goofy sounding. But so we're taking it back to the late 60s for a hot minute before we press forward with the rest of this section of the quest. What the hell you been doing, Will? Hi, what's up? How's your Halloween? Was your trip to London? Tell me about that.
Oh my god, the trip to London was wonderful. As anyone who follows us on social media might see, I found Bram Stoker's house. And here's what I figured out. Here's the one difference I found between living in the States and living in London is if this was in Philadelphia, for example, Bram Stoker's house would be a scrappy and likable but severely underfunded museum. Whereas in London, this is just somebody's residence, and I just had to feel very uncomfortable as I took a selfie out front of someone's house.
Someone's literal actual house.
Yeah, there was just someone's car parked in the back of the photo I took, and I felt like such an asshole, but I had to do it.
That's so funny, though. Can you imagine just, straight chilling in Bram Stoker's house, as your house?
It's very weird, and I feel like you have to acquiesce to just people are gonna be taking photos in front of your house. This is also the case. I went to Liverpool for a day and did a whole Beatles tour with my parents, and I went to the house where George Harrison is born, and it's just on a little side street, and people just live there, unlike the houses that Paul grew up in and the house that John grew up in. George's house is just a house, and I think they just have to, accept that strangers from all over the world are just going to be posing outside their front door forever.
Yeah, 100%. And, I feel obviously, Paul and John have, a different level of fame, but I feel like the George fans in particular are the hardest core in terms of being fans of that particular Beatle. So, it would not surprise me if that house got a lot of visitors, like my mom. I feel like my mom would want to go do that,
Yeah. Listen, as a George stan, I get it. It is it's a specific breed. You're not really quiet about it.
Not for the quiet Beatle, etc.
That was a great trip. Halloween was pretty good. I initially was going to do a full Papa Emeritus ghost makeup, and then it ended up being 80 degrees on Halloween weekend. And my makeup kept sweating off, so I did something else. How was your Halloween?
I do love the idea that you were actually too hot, fucked up, but here we are. It was dog shit. I was really sick for the entire weekend. I had a raging double ear infection, which led my boss to say to me, "What are you, 5?" Which was so cutting, but so true. So I did not do a lot for the actual weekend, but I was better by literal Halloween day. So I had to work, but it was really chill. When we lived in Columbus, I don't know if Philadelphia does this or Philly, also Pittsburgh is too gritty. Columbus would schedule trick or treat for a specific day, like not on Halloween and the kids would do it then, it would be like it's going to be 5 to 7 on like the 28th, especially if actual Halloween was on a weekend.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, in Pittsburgh they're like, yeah, fuck that, kids are coming out on Halloween. And it was also very nice. So it was crazy. There were kids absolutely everywhere. I live in a residential neighborhood. I briefly drove over to the Squirrel Hill area,
Oh, nice.
kind of not realizing that it was like there would be trick or treat, and then was like, I've made a huge fucking mistake. There are so many people over here. But yeah, it was good. I feel like it is the time of the year when you and I are most powerful, you know?
It is, yes. I am like at my fullest capacity power. That does during like the stretch of the week leading up to Halloween. That does not apparently entail being able to put makeup on in 80-degree heat, but I digress.
That's a specific power though. Like you and I are also both run hot. Like I'm a sweaty person.
Fire signs, am I right?
I don't fire signs, am I fucking right? I was just gonna say like Mediterranean, but
Listen,
same difference.
six and a half dozen of the other.
Mm-hmm. Oh man. Well, let's talk a little about today's episode, because this is kind of a fun one. So we have looked at a lot of adaptations, but today's is, I think, the first episode of a television show. We've seen a few like made-for-TV movies, but this is our first like television show that we're looking at here, which is kind of fun. And this is technically a television play, which is a genre, usually of something drama that's broadcast from a studio. And it has a kind of multi-camera setup as opposed to like a movie. But this was very popular in a lot of different programming in the UK in the kind of 50s to the 80s. And once we talk a little bit about this, it will become clear that this is like a tragically British adaptation. But there's a couple of anthology theories that were popular in the BBC, including Mystery and Imagination, what we're looking at today. But some of them that you might have heard of, or your grandpa might have heard of, I don't fucking know. Armchair Theater, The Wednesday Play, Play for Today. And then it kind of got phased out because it just became a bit of an outdated genre and an outdated way of filming things. But you actually have a whole section in your notes that I'll let you run here first before we get into this particular episode of the show called "What the Hell is Mystery and Imagination?" So you're welcome to go through that, my friend.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. So Mystery and Imagination, as you said, was a British anthology series, but what separated this from some of the other ones that you mentioned is that Mystery and Imagination was dedicated specifically to horror and classic ghost stories. Mainly British horror. They did a lot of M.R. James, who's my boy, one of my favorite British horror writers, but, throwing in the occasional Edgar Allan Poe, as is probably the want of all ghost story and horror programming at some point. Each episode adapted a classic story to the screen. This is actually, we're sort of lucky that we have this episode available. Most of the first three series of the show no longer exist for a multitude of reasons. One of them being that a lot of British TV did not really see the value in saving old shows, so they would just record over them. And so a lot of the early show doesn't exist. This is a similar issue that people run into with the early Doctor Who. A lot of those episodes simply do not exist anymore because BBC's like, don't need this. Most of it was filmed in black and white, as was this episode, but they did do a couple in color here and there, especially as the show went on. It aired from 1966 and ended in 1970. And Dracula, this episode aired first on November 18th, 1968, just a week after their adaptation of Frankenstein.
Which we will bookmark for when inevitably you're like, we got to do the Franken pod, because you are a man of the Stein.
I am a man of the Stein.
What is there to say? And I don't blame you. But yeah, if you are looking for an analog, The Twilight Zone is similar, though these episodes are pretty long on average. This ran just about 80 minutes exactly, which was, nice and tight. Like it was a nice break from watching a 2-hour movie.
Yeah,
But yeah, this has very much has a stuffy, stiff upper lip British take on the kind of like fun sci-fi of the Twilight Zone. Though there were some kind of surprising things in this adaptation, so we'll get to that. Do you want to take us through our cast and crew here, and then I'll get a little bit into some of the differences between this adaptation and the novel, of which there are some interesting ones.
absolutely. So the director of this was Patrick Dromgoole, and it was written as a teleplay by Charles Graham. I'm going to lead off with Dracula in our cast. Dracula in this adaptation is played by Denholm Elliott, who I would wager most of our listeners likely know best from his role as Dr. Marcus Brody in the Indiana Jones movies.
Aha, there it is.
But following Denholm Elliott in this cast, we also have Harker as played by Corbin Redgrave, Dr. Seward as played by James Maxwell, Mina Harker played by Suzanne Neve, Lucy Weston doing the last name shortening again, played by Susan George, and Van Helsing played by Bernard Archard. Archard. That sounds right.
I
Archard.
like Bernard Archard.
I was looking at this name, and I knew it was going to be an uphill battle getting through it, and
Yep.
I was right.
You were right, but like I don't know. I would think I would have said Archard. It's also the rhyming.
Yeah, Bernard
Like
Archard.
Bernard Archard. God, it's dumb. Oh man. All right, so like I mentioned, part of what's been fun for me is kind of seeing what writers decide to change when doing an adaptation. Because looking at Dracula, it's an epistolary novel. It's fairly long. It has a lot of characters, a lot of whom serve similar purposes. And it's got kind of an odd plot structure. Like you start in the castle, you go back to England, you go back to like there's a lot of back and forth. And it is a difficult text to adapt. So this version, which I do not believe is the first to do this, especially of the ones we've watched, begins starting already in Whitby, England. So we have cut the castle section completely. And the opening of this is where a patient in an asylum, Dr. Seward's asylum, who usually we would refer to as Renfield, who plays the role of Renfield in that he is eating bugs and serving Dracula and shit. But in this is simply known as 34. Escapes and intrudes upon a little party that is hosted by the Westons, who in this case is Lucy and her mother, and Dr. Seward, to whom she is engaged. So immediately we have cut a third of the novel, and we have condensed Quincy, Arthur, and Seward into one character, who is Dr. Seward, who is engaged to Lucy. And then we kind of get our usual back and forth between Lucy and Dracula. Mina arrives, having been distraught that her husband Jonathan has not returned, which does happen in the novel, but he has not returned because, surprise, he is 34/Renfield. Instead of going insane and winding up in Austria or some shit, or Hungary, I don't know. Like, there's somewhere where they call and they're like, yeah, it might be. Yeah, it's Budapest.
Yeah.
They're like, we found this guy. Is he yours? He has made it back to England with Dracula, and is insane and kind of playing dual roles. What did you think about this as a twisty twist and as just like an adaptational change?
I thought it was pretty surprising. It worked because it is essentially what they did in the 1931 Dracula, only in that case they kept him as Renfield instead of as Harker. And in this, it's a little more resonant. That gives him a little more weight because rather than being Renfield as a character doesn't really have connection to anyone else in the story. Making it Jonathan does make the stakes much higher, makes the tragedy of the story that much more potent, I would say.
Yeah, and like I was kind of surprised that we hadn't seen this yet because like you said in the 1931 version we also cut the castle like by a large margin. And then Renfield is the suitor. Well, we don't cut it, but like it's truncated. Renfield is the person who goes. So it does make sense to combine them. It just hadn't like occurred to me personally, so I was like, wait a second. That's very clever. So, like, it's a good twist if you know the story. And if you don't, and you're watching this for some bizarre reason, I can't imagine why you would choose this of all of the things to choose to watch this as your first experience with the text at all. I think it, like you said, it heightens the drama because Mina comes in and, you know, they're like, can you talk to this patient for us? And she's like, that's my husband. Like, and her response there is very dramatic. Anyway, moving on. Once again, we have the exchange between Lucy and Dracula. She's been declines in health. Seward calls his mentor Van Helsing. They try to treat her. She dies. We see that a couple of times. However, it's right around here where things get to go a little off the rails, but in a way that I kind of respect. So Lucy rises from the dead, is doing vampire stuff. In the novel, she is seen by some like local children. In this one, she runs into Mina. And Lucy is the one who bites her as opposed to Dracula. And there's only a very brief exchange between Dracula and Mina. And then she is staked by Van Helsing and Seward as usual. And then it is time for our final confrontation. So the second section of this, which is in 3 like little acts, has kind of stretched out a portion of the novel again where Lucy is in failing health and they are fighting Dracula to be the meat of the whole thing, is that interplay. And the actual, you know, stuff with Mina winds up taking up maybe 10 minutes. Lastly, after our final confrontation where Dracula is burned by the sun, the story ends with a little twist cliffhanger implying that Mina has become a vampire despite the best efforts of our leading men. And that is the end. So a couple of fun changes here. We've seen a few that suggest that like Dracula isn't actually dead, like the like scare cord on like a floating cape or some shit.
Yeah,
you know?
in Dracula 79.
Yes, exactly. We've seen that a few times. And then there's also been ones where you just get like a fucking downer of an ending. Like where Van Helsing dies. But this is the first time I think that we've seen Mina stay as a vampire, but Dracula die, which was kind of fun, especially because Mina does have a fairly diminished role in this, which tends to be the case in adaptations that focus on Lucy. But something that I think we both noted is Lucy biting Mina is interesting, and the exchange between the two of them is gay as hell. Holy crap. Yeah, I think we've been waiting for some gay shit to happen in this, and boy, did we get it, because that was pretty explicit, I would say.
Yeah, I would say so, and I did not expect it to emerge in a 60s British television adaptation of all places. That wasn't on my bingo card.
Not at all. Like, and it is. At first, I thought it was like gonna be subtext, but then it was text.
Oh yeah, that is super text.
That is straight up text. And the way that is performed was really, really interesting. And then like another note just a small one in terms of like a minor change that I also wasn't expecting in the 60s British television show that like old ladies watched at night after their husband had gone to bed, was one of, there's a brief flashback to the castle, and one of the brides is a black woman, which I believe is the first time we have seen anyone specifically black in an adaptation thus far.
I think you're right. I'm racking my brain. No one else comes to mind.
Like, we will watch Blackula at some point, like, for sure, but that's 1972. But, I was kind of surprised by that. I was like, oh, again, of all things, this is the time that we're watching this. But what did you think of the changes to the, the latter quarter of the film in particular?
I liked the changes that you've highlighted. I think those are interesting. They add something fresh. I think the thing that doesn't work as well for me and we can certainly get into it when we sort of share more of our personal opinions, is that some of the changes that they really are necessitated by moving from a theatrical film to a TV series really kind of narrows the scope down, and what usually is sort of a grand chase back to Transylvania and a game of cat and mouse really just becomes some guys going to the graveyard next to where they already live, and it feels a little anticlimactic.
Yeah, no, I'm in agreement with you there, and I think we can just kind of get right into our personal takes on this before we talk about the cast and all that. But like, I think that overall, I did like this more than I thought I would, but I'm in agreement that the pacing and the truncation of the actual climax was kind of a weird choice. And I think your point about like, it feels like there's really high stakes, like they've got to go back, it's cat and mouse. This being literally next door, as you mentioned, is very funny. It just feels a little silly, compared to what's actually going on. And there's some great moments of like high drama in this, but because it's a teleplay, I also found that some of those moments kind of undercut themselves by seeming goofy. Like, the first time that it becomes clear that Lucy is a vampire is she asks Seward to kiss her, and then kind of like recoils and jumps up and makes like a growling sound and then passes out. And it's supposed to be like repulsive and scary, but it just kind of comes across as like silly. Like, she's just like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, and I feel like that happened at like 3 or 4 kind of key moments in the back half of this. But yeah, the graveyard in particular was rough. I think my actual note on this was like, this is a goofy psychic battle, because they're basically holding him in place with a cross until the sun rises. So as a result, Dracula's just kind of scowling at them, and then Van Helsing and Seward are just kind of scowling at him, and that's all that happens for like, 3 minutes. In general, yeah, like what are some of your other takes on this? Like, I feel like we don't have to be as strict with our script here. We can just kind of shoot the shit about this one.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, unsurprisingly, I was not really digging too deep to try and find contemporary reviews of an episode of television from 1968.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I like this one as much as you did. I felt like
that's valid.
It was a little. I like the twists, and I like the things that it does incorporate from the novel, and the things that it doesn't show us, and the way that it sort of allows us to fill in the gaps that way. But I felt like on the whole, this one was kind of dry, and I think part of that is I felt like we spent a lot of time with Seward and Van Helsing not really doing terribly much, really taking much action, doing a lot of talking and arguing with each other. And I think part of it is just, it is a short adaptation. It's 88 minutes. And I think this is a big story to try and translate into an 88-minute TV episode. Especially, it's not the like 90-something minute Universal movie that also has the benefit of a big Hollywood studio and more budget and room to breathe. So it's I feel like this is an adaptation that is straining at its confines.
That's a great way to put it. And no, I totally agree. I think part of the reason that like I did kind of like lukewarm like this one is that it feels a little nostalgic. It just kind of made me want to go watch the Twilight Zone. Do you ever have that where you watch something that's like mediocre and then you're like, I'm gonna watch the better version of that?
I do get that. I mean, I will say I wanted to watch it. This just made me want to go back and watch some more episodes of this show in particular. Shamefully, I think a lot of the ones I want to watch, particularly the M.R. James adaptation, who I think has, his stories are usually like maybe 10 pages long. They translate really well to the screen. A lot of those episodes are now lost, which is tragic to me.
No, that is tragic. But yeah, I think that your point about it kind of straining at the confines of its own production are exceedingly clear. Like it's low budget, you can tell. It's on a and I think some of the stuff about the writing and the pacing in particular is where it becomes kind of starts to burst at the seams because, like you said, there's a whole section of this where, like, not really anything happens, and granted, a whole lot of that happens in the book. There's a lot of fucking talking in the book, but it's a book. Whereas this is like, we're going to be a single episode of television. So to stretch out that middle section with Seward and Van Helsing, as you said, just kind of arguing and taking care of Lucy, that takes up a huge portion of the film. And that's not particularly exciting to watch. But I don't know. Like, I kind of would have liked to see them redo the script to be more even in its pacing, especially because it's like, quote, 3 acts. I feel like they could have condensed all of that middle stuff down by a solid, like, 15 minutes. Like, solidly. Especially if you know what's happening. Like it just put its eggs in the wrong basket, you know? But yeah, I didn't hate it. There's been very few things in the show that I like genuinely disliked. This is a pretty middling one in a lot of different ways. I will say though, I really liked the costuming in this version.
Oh yeah, tell me more about that.
Yeah, so like some of the older, and particularly the 70s ones, there's like I'm thinking of the BBC Dracula, the 2-hour Louis Jourdan one in particular. That is trying to do period piece in a very fun and over-the-top way, but as a result, has some kind of community theater looking shit. Whereas this, I feel like, was doing period piece but having fun with it. So like things were over the top but they didn't look cheap. It's a really specific line to walk. So like in our opening scene where the Westons are having a dinner party, Dracula is wearing tails and like a waistcoat and these amazing little like square opera glasses, and Lucy is in this full ball gown with like big puff sleeves and like a velvet choker, and like I don't know, it kind of had a like a upscale Halloween party vibe to it. I don't think that was intentional at all. I think they were just like, what the fuck do we have in the costume department? But it was weirdly kind of fun to look at. And like Mina has this big 60s hair for no reason.
Oh, it is massive. I did note that. That was one of the things that really stuck out.
Like she's got like a full beehive, and I was like, what? Like what a strange mishmash of things. And then Van Helsing also has like teeny tiny little opera glasses on a string that he pulls out of his pocket, and then like this big plaid overcoat. So just like some bits and pieces here where they really went balls to the wall with the costuming, kind of for no reason. Seward has full mutton chops, like, and that connect to his mustache. I'm like, I don't know who's making the choices in this, but I do respect them for not giving a fuck.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's Harker with his like shorter length, like very luscious white hair.
Yes. Oh man, how silly. So yeah, like this felt like a little more fun than some of the drier things, but as I mentioned earlier, this is tragically British, and that does become clear, especially in the sections where there's a lot of dialogue and not a lot of action. It can verge on fucking boring. But yeah, like a solid middler from me. I get that it's also like you liked the changes, but it was pretty dry. I think that I didn't like the decision to have the cliffhanger with Mina. Just like, who fucking cares? You know what I mean? Like, she was such a non-present character in this version anyway. And like, they're right there with her, so I guess the implication would be that she kills him just like immediately, and I'm like, okay, then why not show us that? Like, I don't know. I was kind of mixed bag on that.
It's a very subtle cliffhanger at the end, and I feel like, yeah, I think you're right. If it had been more overt, I think that would have been a better ending, because it feels a little too, it feels uncertain in a way that does not inspire dread, and more just sort of like inspires confusion.
That is a great way to put it. Yeah, like, it just, like, what's the point? Yeah, and like, speaking of it being dry, like, one of my just notes about the writing in this is that the whole thing is extremely Shakespearean, and oftentimes that is a compliment. There's a couple situations in which it is really not here. I have read a lot of Shakespeare. Most of my acting experience is with Shakespeare and other classical theater. If you have read any Shakespeare, particularly the tragedies, and read them in their entirety, you may have noticed that there is always one weird comic scene for like no reason in the middle. Like, there will be a porter or a delivery person or some messenger or something who has a single scene in the middle of like Act 3 or some shit where he's just talking and being kind of a jester in the middle of this tragic play, and is never seen again. That is Mr. Swales in this. Mr. Swales is the elderly gentleman who Mina and Lucy see in the graveyard. This is probably our like second or third time seeing him, and we were both excited by that. But he just goes on this whole rant, which is like strangely crude and like a little shocking for the time. A lot of it's about suicide. But having that just kind of shoehorned in the middle of this high drama teleplay was, I immediately was like, this is just Shakespeare. We also get a monologue from Dracula at one point talking about his entire family history for like minutes and minutes, about like Attila the Hun and shit. Again, it's like they took the parts of Shakespeare that every adaptation cuts, and all of the English teachers in the world are like, don't worry about that, it doesn't fucking matter. You know, like when one of the students is like, why was there this 2-page section of somebody making like pussy jokes? Yeah, that's why. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Just cut it. It doesn't matter. But yeah, that's the last of my my ranting about this kind of odd little version here. Should we talk a little bit about our cast members?
Yes. Where would you like to start?
You know what? Let's just start in your order and how they're built on your sheet here.
All right. So we're starting with our Drac, Denholm Elliott. Okay, listen. I like Denholm Elliott a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I really, he's great in a lot of. He's in a ton of British and American movies. He's a phenomenal character actor. I love him as a great, I love him as like a great and easily overwhelmed character, particularly in The Last Crusade. He is a very weird choice for Dracula to me.
Unbelievably weird. This is incel Dracula, right? Like, this is like fucking stage magician Dracula.
The thing is, this is not a Dracula that, like, I don't know if he even has the awareness to be an incel. He is giving your cousin that you see at the family reunion, who is wearing, like, a fedora and a katana, who is not yet discovered, the whole incel online community, but like there is something going on, and you don't have to hard be like, oh, buddy, we gotta have a talk.
Bud. Mm-hmm. No, it's exactly that. You're right. He doesn't have the awareness of it. Like he's not in like bitter online forums yet, but he's definitely leaning into the cultural signifiers of incel. It's the fedora. I think it's because they styled him with a goatee.
That is really it. That truly is it.
He's giving like 1995 VHS store employee who is sexually harassing every woman there. He is giving, it's the cousin. It's your cousin who you don't have the heart to like, please don't go to these websites. It's weird, man. He was a fucking weird choice. And this adaptation does lean a lot into the sexuality, but it's certainly not coming from him.
No, he is generating none of this. In all the scenes where he is biting Lucy and she's in the throes of ecstasy, that is entirely Susan George bringing that thunder. This is almost incidental to whatever Denholm Elliott is doing on screen.
And like, he just, man, you have to, because so much of this particular script is about the tension between Lucy and Dracula, and that like Mina's being like, hey, you're flirting too much and like your fiance's gonna be mad at you, and Seward's like, I'm super jealous, like is that such a crime? But to have them be like, have very little actual screen time together and have negative chemistry, again, mostly because of Denholm Elliott, like Susan George is kind of doing this like almost teenagery obsession thing. And he is giving absolutely fucking nothing. What a weird performance. I cannot say that it is one of the stronger ones we've seen.
No, I think, and the thing, if it does work, it is in the way that I don't buy him as a ancient threat that has come to English shores to challenge English morals, but I totally buy him as maybe the creepy Eastern European neighbor who is just hanging around your house a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Like he's not a grandiose threat. He's one that just happens to be around.
Yes.
Good God. Moving on.
All right, so that brings us to Corin Redgrave as Harker.
Also unbelievably Shakespearean. Lots of over-the-top madman ranting, but I didn't hate it. It was a little more palatable to me than some of our other, like, kooky crazy Renfields. I think because they actually give him time to talk instead of just laugh and be like, I'm silly. There is one section where he's monologuing about being abandoned by Dracula, and he climbs up to the corner of his cell and extends his blanket to look like a cape and is just, like, rabidly monologuing, and I was like, once again, props for committing to the bit. He, like, middle of the road for me. Not the best Renfield, but definitely not the worst, because we've seen some fucking bad ones.
Oh, yeah. And I think what is interesting, especially having him be Harker in this, is that we at no point really get a sense of Harker as just kind of a normal, mild-mannered solicitor. We do get one brief, very brief flashback, but you don't really get a sense of his personality before he's gnashing his teeth, rolling his eyes in a cell.
And I kind of would have liked to see more Gollum Smeagol with him. Like, it would have been nice to have some moments of lucidity where you're seeing Harker and seeing a mild-mannered solicitor, and then going back to, eating bugs and scratching the walls. But I think that would have been kind of up to the drama of it all, especially when Mina's in the room, because his immediate reaction to her is, like, repulsion. Like, he's fucking pissed.
Oh, yeah.
And jealous that she's currently the object of Dracula's attraction, which is an interesting interplay for sure. But yeah, good, but he had kind of an impossible task too, which is to play these two extremely opposing characters, and definitely just kind of did this as straight Renfield with a different name. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I accept it.
Yeah, I think in the Harker Renfield canon, he's got a place.
Definitely, especially because we've had such fucking milquetoast harkers, and we always will. There's no getting around that.
It's just,
Next up.
yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I have nothing. I have nothing to say. Yeah, that is a role that is going to just really present a challenge to actors as long as they make Draculas.
As long as they be making Draculas. Next up, we have James Maxwell as Dr. Seward, who, again, is the condensed Quincy, Arthur, and Seward in this version. I think this is the best Seward we've had so far.
Yeah, he's very... Yeah, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt there.
No, you go first.
Yeah, he gets to be kind of more of a, I guess, more of a jackass than Seward gets to be in any of these. He doesn't... So he gets to have a much stronger personality, and he acts kind of detestable, but, I mean, you sort of need someone who's going to push against Van Helsing and provide some of that drama.
Right, and, like, in the past, we usually see, these characters condensed a lot, but we've had a lot of Arthurs, and then a lot of Sewards who are, like, really unbelievably boring. But, yeah, I think he kind of wound up being a good in-scene antagonist. And his performance in particular, I found to be kind of unexpected in that he was kind of like brash and masculine, and like dismissive in a lot of ways. Like there's one moment where he's like, "It's the 19th century, man. We are men of science." And I was like, yeah, that's the kind of shit I like to see from you, because Seward has a huge role in the book. Most of the clippings and journal entries and telegrams are from him. So it was nice to actually see this character represented in a way that wasn't just like symbolic for the role of being engaged to Lucy. And those mutton chops were kind of hype.
Oh yeah. I feel like he's got a little bit of that because he is such a POV character who's jotting on this down, dictating it in the book. He's got a little bit of that sort of like Nick Carraway syndrome where he can't really be a full character. He's got to be someone who's
100%.
just observing and reporting what he's seeing. And so, yeah, I think it helps that he gets to actually be brash. He gets to be this oppositional force. He's downright unlikable in a lot of scenes, which I did not expect.
Yeah. I didn't either, but I thought it was kind of fun to watch. Definitely somebody who also is a stage actor, like you could tell, just by the way he carries himself, by the way he, enunciates everything. Like I don't know, he had good energy, and I found myself drawn to him in most of the scenes that he was in. Certainly was not looking at Denholm Elliott. Anyway, yes, moving on.
So we have got Mina Harker, played by Suzanne Neve.
Meh.
Yeah.
I don't care for this Mina.
Yeah, this is we have a big pile of middling Minas.
Which is so tragic because she's my fucking girl. And so many of these adaptations decide to, condense her and Lucy, swap their roles. But they kind of had her be like kind of stern and matronly. Like she has very few interactions with Lucy, but she's just kind of scolding her the whole time in all of them until the end where suddenly it's gay. But yeah, like it's not her fault. She didn't have a lot to work with. But I don't feel like there's really even that much to touch on because she was such like a non-actor.
Yeah, I mean, there's a note, one of your notes that I think really succinctly lays it out, is that this Mina is very matronly and stern, whereas Lucy is once again basically a teenager. And I think this is the thing that I feel like a lot of the adaptations miss, is that there's a reason that they're friends. Yeah, like, I think Mina is also, like, a tutor and a teacher to Lucy, but they're friends. They like each other. And they feel like I feel like a lot of adaptations don't really explore what it is that makes them friends. I think a lot of them, mind you, are willing to really jump into, like, a sapphic relationship between the two, but none of them, even those, don't really explore why are these two friends? Why do they like each other?
Yes. Like, this one seems like they don't like each other. Like, this seems like the opposite. Like, they seem like Mina just seems like she's annoyed by Lucy at all times for being such a little slut. You know? It frustrates me because there are going to be some later on that do get into this relationship, but I do feel like it's a really core part of the novel. Because Mina is in this unique position of having her fucking fiance disappear and her best friend die. So, like, she has unique stakes in this plot to beat Dracula's ass even before she's bitten. But yeah, this just, you're right. They don't really explore that nearly enough. But speaking of Lucy, we've got Susan George as Lucy, who once again is essentially playing a teenager. Oh man, okay, this is complicated because she's actually pretty good. I liked this Lucy. I thought she was an interesting combination of daring, naive, and flirtatious. Like, she shows up at Dracula's house by herself to be like, yo, you here? Like, it's got that like young woman, like, parasocial obsession thing going on. Which is an interesting take on the character. It becomes gross when all of her scenes with Dracula are one-sided, extremely sexual. Because, boy, oh boy, those bite scenes are surprising. I was not expecting them to be that much. Again, for the dry British pseudo-Shakespearean adaptation. She is, like, fully moaning. Like, these are, like, the worst porn sounds you can imagine. And that makes it awkward when this person has been portrayed as and looks very young.
Yeah, I mean, that is similar to, like, the Louis Jourdan BBC adaptation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that this Lucy is definitely played older than that version.
For sure.
But it is still very uncomfortable.
And I think she did a good job. Like, she had the most energy of anybody in the cast, I would say, met only by Seward. But even in her scenes with Seward, they don't even seem to fucking like each other.
Yeah. They don't really... I can't really remember any of the scenes of them interacting, because I feel like a lot of them are just having little terse arguments, or that's it, really.
Which is it's fucking weird, man. But yeah, like, I think she did a good job. She definitely outshined her other female co-star and Dracula. Yeah, those bite scenes were certainly something. Oh man. Okay, last but not least, we've got the unpronounceable Bernard Arshard as Van Helsing. What'd you think?
This was a rizzless Van Helsing.
I was not expecting that. That's fucking funny. Please elaborate.
What I like about Van Helsing, particularly in the book, is that he's a kindly old man, but he's a charmer. There is something about him that, like, he makes people feel at ease. He charms people. That is his greatest strength. I think, he is able to move along his plot and he's able to, convince people before anyone knows what's going on that he has to put garlic along the windowsills and give everyone a big crucifix, because he's not like paternal in a sense of like patriarchal, but he's like, there's something kind about him. He's got a kind way that makes people feel at ease, that are like, all right, Dr. Van Helsing, you know it's best, Professor. And you don't get any of that. He's just kind of a stuffy academic who has some outlandish ideas and none of the charm.
Yeah, no, I'm in agreement with you there. This was I had not thought to use the word rizzless, but, like, you're right. And yeah, there was a couple moments that I think that a lot of the unintentional comedy of this version was due to Van Helsing. He comes across as kind of, like, bumbling, and he's supposed to be the expert. He doesn't seem like an expert here. Like, he
No,
seems like a guy that Seward found at the bus stop.
he does not seem very assured of himself.
Right. And, like, that's not comforting. That doesn't really make for a character that we're supposed to trust. I will say I did find it extremely, extremely funny when he would swear in German. Again, unintentional comedy. I was like, is this Van Helsing Dutch or German? Like, what's what's going on? Like, what's happening here? But yeah, just like meh, kind of meh. Overall, kind of a meh adaptation. I'll be real with you.
Yeah, and I think that is part of my issue, is that so much of the movie is just him and Seward. And Seward is just, like, basically chewing the scenery and chewing Van Helsing up along with it. And
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
there's, like, a scene where, like, he, like, angrily, like, throws Van Helsing, right? Like,
Yes!
and Van Helsing, like, just kind of takes it.
I'm like, this young man, your mentor, just beat your ass. Like, what are you doing? Frustrating. Like, I feel like this had a lot of potential, but did fall short in some pretty important places. Where would you put Mr. Denholm Elliott on our ranking?
Oh boy, he's not up there.
I'm gonna put him one above Louis Jourdan at the bottom.
Yeah, he's not. I don't think he is self-aware enough to be creepy, like Louis Jourdan is. Denholm Elliott's Dracula has no theories about sexuality or seduction. I don't think it has crossed his mind even once.
No. Yeah, you're talking about no rizz. This Dracula got no fucking rizz, dude. Oh, I don't even know what that means. I'm online, but not that much. Good God. Are there anything else that you would like to kind of touch on before we pick each other's notes and read our tweet and all that?
Oh my God. No. I feel like I think this is the thing, is this is an adaptation that I've, like, my brain is ignited a little more as we talk about it, but I could feel, even, like, right after watching it, it just slipped from my mind.
That's valid. That's totally valid. I only have, like, two small things that I wanted to touch on. One was the burn effect when Dracula is caught in the sunlight was actually very cool.
Oh, that was pretty sick. Okay, yes.
Because it was like a time lapse of him, like, fucking disintegrating, and it was surprising because this had been an unbelievably bloodless and sanitized version so far, to have this big moment of, like, actual visceral horror at the end. And the other was that I do feel like if you have ever watched one of the Royal Shakespeare Company films, where they will do something similar to this, this may be worth a watch for you. Like, if you like that kind of old-timey, high literary, and yet low-budget thing, if you like early Doctor Who, like, give it a shot.
Yes.
But it's short. It's short, but I do agree it did kind of fall through the sieve of the old brain.
Yep.
All right, what is your note of mine here?
I mean, there's some real good ones. I mean, an honorable mention is about
I'm gonna pick two of yours.
Okay,
Yeah,
because there's one about Lucy that is just, she is straight up nuddin'. Really good.
She is.
She really is. But my favorite one here is one that I also put to the tune of Spooky Scary Skeletons, which is Kooky Crazy Renfield Time.
Yep, with capital K, Kooky.
Yep.
My honorable mention for you is New Lore, Seward Hates Catholics.
There's a... Yeah, when Van Helsing, like, introduces the idea of putting a crucifix around Lucy's neck, or making her hold one, Seward freaks out, and, like, not for, like, superstition,
Yes.
but because he sees it as some, like, weird, heinous papal plot. It is specifically because it is Catholic.
is so fucking weird. What a bizarre choice. And then my winner for you is Harker bursting through the window like the Kool-Aid Man LMAO. Because he really does. It's like 55 seconds into the film.
It's so good. It is like, such a good little punch at the beginning.
Oh, so good. Oh, man. All right. Well, I believe it is your turn to do the honorary reading of the tweet, and I've got one for you in our chat.
All right, I do have it right here. This one comes from @hunktears.com. Retweet and share if you think Dracula is a real guy. Like, if you think Dracula is something imagined by kids, quote if you think Dracula is a metaphor for woke.
Oh, man. It's so fucking stupid. I love that shit. Jesus Christ. Well, thank you once again for joining us on this little, like, brief foray into the past. I believe next week, or not next week, good God, not next week, next episode.
Is it finally time?
I think it's finally time.
Oh, yes!
Dracula.
God damn,
That's going to be a long, meaty episode, so consider this your appetizer, fools.
You've been warned.
We'll catch you again next time. You've been warned. See you later.
Bye.